Why has this team gotten worse, even though Anthony Edwards has gotten better?
Ooh, I like that question. I'll let you start off with that, Antoine.
I think because they brought in a more mediocre power forward than the one they traded us.
Debatable.
Because Cat is your all-star starter right now in the East, probably for power forward or center.
Not saying much for the East, but you know.
Just because he's been doing really well. Also because he's in a different system compared to Minnesota. Rudy Gobert, I think, just been not putting up points, which I feel like he should be putting up a little more.
How much are you getting paid?
Rudy?
A lot.
He's
A lot.
Quite a lot.
Like 9?
He's putting up like...
He just signed an extension a few weeks ago.
He's putting up like 5-point games, 9, 8.
I mean, Rudy's the defensive guy. We know
Still,
this.
Yeah,
you
but
pay that money, you got to put
easy,
up points.
easy,
Hey, look, if he's
dunks.
winning DPOYs, I really don't care what he does on the offensive end.
Yeah, but even this year, he's not doing so well on defense.
I want to say the biggest disappointment is the player that came along with Randle, Dante DiVincenzo.
Okay, get into that.
He has been abysmal for them. He's only averaging 9 points a game. His, I guess, 3-point shooting has not been like it was with us because, of course, he was starting. But I don't think he's cracked one 20-point game this year at all. Of course, he's on the bench, but I don't know what's going on. You know, my sixth-man pick is not looking good because he's my sixth man because I love him. But I guess that's a big thing as well. J-Mac has been, I think, still pretty good defensively. I haven't watched a lot of Timberwolves basketball, but I think those are the big things. And their bench is kind of thin right now. I think just, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
I think I disagree with that. I think their bench is pretty solid.
Outside of Naz and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante is crapping the bed.
Okay, Dante. But in theory, he should be a good
He should be, yeah. If he's getting better than the bench,
right?
is not, yeah.
Right.
Same thing with, I think also Rob Dillingham has provided a spark.
A little bit.
So
a little bit. And outside of that, Conley's been injured a little bit.
Right.
I mean, Rob's getting some minutes now, but it's not notable.
Don't forget, Nas is Nas starting.
Nas is getting good minutes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's in something's wrong. I don't know if it's the Randle curse that's in Minnesota for them. I don't want to say it's a curse, but they traded away a prime player right now in Cat.
Yeah.
So and he's improved tremendously under us.
Yeah.
So
Offensively.
I don't think they utilized him well in Minnesota because of Ant being there, of course. And plus, I think Rudy should have been the one traded, not Cat.
Wow.
Here's where I heavily disagree.
Okay.
Here's where I heavily disagree. And I think people are getting the wrong message with Minnesota. Because let's call a spade a spade. Karl-Anthony Towns has a top 3 worst contract in the NBA. It's horrible. He's due like $64 million in like 2 years. Like no one wants to pay him that money to only provide on one end of the floor. So Rudy is just your typical standard max contract. It's nothing really. It will be easy to move once it's close to expiring. The problem with Minnesota is because they got themselves trapped with Cat's contract, they needed to get off of it. And Ant's only 22, 23. Like, they're not trying to win basketball games right now as far as winning a championship. That's not their goal. Because if you keep Cat on this roster and then you're forced to re-sign him or lose him for nothing, by the time Ant gets to his prime, they're so deep into the second apron, they can't do anything. Because by that point, you'll have to pay J-Mac again, you'll have to pay Alexander Walker and pay everyone else. Like I said a few months ago, this is why they drafted Rob Dillingham. This is why they traded Karl-Anthony Towns. Because they need flexibility when Ant actually is in his prime, playing at his best. That way they can compete, be flexible by the time Boston's done, by the time Denver's done, by the time all these super teams are gone. LeBron's out the league, Steph's gone, KD's gone. This is what they did. Like I said, Cat offensively has been brilliant, one of the best offensive players this year, but he's been one of the worst defensive centers by a country mile this year. And that's in an Eastern Conference that's not good whatsoever. So Minnesota did the right thing. This year is just taking their medicine because you've had very up and down moments from Julius Randle where he has a game winner one night. Another night he's showing poor-ass body language like he always does when things aren't going his way. Kind of like the Mikal Bridges front-running, essentially. my real issue has been Mike Conley. He's been awful.
Yeah.
I mean, he stepped it up a bit. I mean, he's I think it's like 50 or 51% from three in his last 6 games. But like, he's been a total liability on both ends.
Yeah.
He's also old as balls.
Exactly.
But like, that's the issue I'm finding with this Minnesota team. And I think what people are just trying to find difficult to understand is that, yeah, they played really well last year. They overachieved. That they did the smart thing, because we've seen teams like the Knicks that overachieve in 2021, and then you give Julius Randle a max contract. Like, that's not always the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions, and that's what Minnesota did. So I credit Tim Connolly for that. They're not going to be that good for the next few years. And you know what? I think they'll be okay with it if it works out in a championship later on.
I love your perspective because you have a GM mindset. You literally look 5 years into the future, and I love that. But I would have to disagree, because I think the issue with this team right now, even though Ant has improved, the issue with this team is Rudy Gobert. And that's because this team has a defense problem. Last year, they were ranked number 1 in defense, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Top 3 at least. This year, I'm pretty sure they're middle of the pack to low.
Right.
Their offense has improved since last year. Their offense, I think, was like 17th last year. This year, it's improved to around like 13.
Yeah.
So their offense has gotten better, and that's because Anthony Edwards is hitting threes like at a clip that he's never done before.
Exactly.
And their defense has dropped off, and I think that responsibility falls onto Rudy Gobert. He's the anchor. Cat is gone, who is this extreme liability on defense, and you would expect Julius Randle to fill that role and be better on defense than Cat, right? You would expect that. And so now it's like, okay, what's going on? And I think you have to point the finger at Rudy Gobert. Like, what's going on, Rudy?
Well, there's two things you could look
This
at.
is why you're getting paid.
There's two things you could look at in that perspective. In one end, Cat as a 4 is a lot better than a 5. That's why Cat's been so poor this year, because he's playing center right now because Mitchell Robinson's out. But do you think maybe the Wolves played so good on the defensive end last year? It's hard to replicate that. Like I think game 2 against Denver and it was either game 1 or game 2. I think they had like statistically the best defensive game in NBA history.
Yeah.
So it's hard to replicate that. When you do so well, you regress to the mean.
Okay.
And look, they've been a play-in team / first round exit for the previous few years. They haven't played this deep into the playoffs in a long time. So this is kind of like a hangover period for them.
Okay.
So I think that's one thing. And obviously, Cat's been with the team for almost a decade now. So it's a tough adjustment. So the adjustment will be rough without Cat, because you're so used to him being there and relying on him.
Right.
Whereas now, I just don't see this team as threatening for now. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to really get going. And I think this period of failure is going to be good for Anthony Edwards, because he needs to fail to succeed.